What would make a grown woman collapse in a courtroom? Not just cry, not just shake, but fall, screaming, clawing at the floor, her voice echoing off the cold marble walls as if she were being dragged into some invisible abyss. That's what happened when Tracy Reiner heard the words. Guilty. Life without parole. A daughter of Hollywood. A woman born into a world of red carpets, legacy, and privilege. Now lying on the courtroom floor in shackles. Her mascara smeared, her wrists cuffed, and her life over. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But what if I told you this wasn't just a tragic fall from grace? What if I told you that the collapse was the result of a secret plan? A betrayal so deep it shattered one of Hollywood's most respected families? And what if I told you that the man she was accused of helping was her own brother? Let that sink in for a moment. Two parents, Rob Reiner, the acclaimed director and actor, and Michelle Reiner, the talented photographer and producer. Dead, stabbed, left in a pool of their own blood inside their quiet Brentwood home. Their daughter, accused of helping their son do it. Sounds like a movie, right? Only this time, there's no script, no second takes, no director yelling cut. This is real life. Raw, brutal, and drenched in blood. And you're about to hear the story Hollywood would never dare to tell. Because this story isn't just about murder. It's about family, fame, secrets, addiction, envy, control, and the hidden cost of legacy. So grab a seat, take a breath, and ask yourself one question. How far would you go to protect your name? It began on a Sunday. Not just any Sunday, but one of those perfect, sun-drenched Southern California mornings. The kind of day where Brentwood's wealthy residents walk their golden retrievers past manicured hedges and sip lattes on their porches. Behind the gates of the Reiner estate, all seemed quiet. Too quiet. Neighbors would later tell investigators that they noticed the house lights flickering around 3 a.m. A motion sensor tripped the garden lights just before dawn. But no one thought much of it. This was Brentwood. This was safe. Until it wasn't. Just before noon, Tracy Reiner made a 911 call that would rattle the LAPD to its core. Her voice was panicked, disjointed. They're not breathing. I tried. I just got here. Please, send someone. First responders arrived within minutes. The scene that met them was nothing short of a nightmare. Two bodies, Rob and Michelle, both showing multiple stab wounds. Blood soaked into the antique Persian rug. The room showed signs of a struggle. A broken lamp. A shattered photo frame. A trail of smeared footprints leading from the master suite to the back door. But here's where things get strange. Tracy claimed she'd just arrived. That she found her parents like that. That she had no idea what happened. But detectives noticed something right away. She was barefoot. Her clothes were stained with something dark. And in her panic, she made a mistake. She left her phone unlocked. One of the officers, documenting the scene, noticed a string of messages. Not just any messages. Texts between Tracy and her brother, Nick. Timestamped just a few hours before the murders. The last message from Tracy read, "Don't back out now. We don't get another shot at this." Let's rewind a little. To understand how a Hollywood family turned into a true crime headline, you need to understand the dynamics. Rob Reiner wasn't just an actor or a director. He was an institution. From All in the Family to When Harry Met Sally, from Stand By Me to A Few Good Men. His fingerprints were on American pop culture. He stood for integrity, art, activism. And Michelle? The quiet powerhouse behind the lens. A fiercely protective mother. A producer with an eye for detail and a reputation for getting things done without the drama. Together, they seemed unshakable. But every perfect picture has shadows. Tracy Reiner, their daughter, had long carried the burden of legacy. Being Rob's daughter came with perks, sure, but it also came with pressure, expectations, and silence. Lots of silence, especially around her younger brother. Nick. Nick Reiner was the wild card. Brilliant, troubled, misunderstood. The family didn't speak much about him in public. But those close to the Reiners knew something was always off. Nick had been in and out of rehab since his teens. Anger issues, paranoia, a history of violent outbursts. He'd once thrown a chair through a producer's office window during a failed pitch meeting. Still, Rob loved him, protected him, even funded his latest film idea, a dark comedy about a dysfunctional Hollywood family. Irony, anyone? Sources close to the family say the last 6 months had been especially tense. Nick had relapsed. Rob cut off financial support. Michelle reportedly told a close friend that they feared for their safety. Then, just days before their deaths, Nick showed up in LA, unannounced. And Tracy? She picked him up from the airport. At first, the police were careful. After all, this was the Reiner family. The media was sniffing around. TMZ helicopters were circling Brentwood before the bodies were even removed. But as the forensics rolled in, something became clear. This wasn't random. There was no sign of forced entry. No robbery. No theft. Whoever did this was family. Tracy was detained for questioning. She denied everything. Said she was trying to protect her brother. That she didn't know what he was planning. But as detectives dug deeper, the evidence mounted. Security footage from a gas station showed Tracy and Nick buying gloves and bleach at 2:13 a.m. Their shared Uber history revealed 2 one-way trips. One to Brentwood, one back to a seedy motel on Sunset Boulevard. And then came the kicker. A voicemail, left on Rob's phone at 3:04 a.m. Tracy's voice, whispering, "It's done. I'm so sorry, Dad." And just like that, the facade shattered. Fast forward to the courtroom. The trial was nothing short of a spectacle. The press dubbed it Hollywood's Oedipus tragedy. Court TV ran nightly specials. Every major network sent anchors. Inside the courtroom, things turned even darker. Nick turned on Tracy, claimed she planned it all, that he was just the tool, that she fed his paranoia, that she promised they'd inherit everything and finally be free. Tracy sobbed through most of the trial. She insisted she tried to stop Nick, that she was a victim too, that her texts were taken out of context. But jurors didn't buy it. Not when presented with blood-stained clothes, GPS tracking, and a journal entry in Tracy's handwriting that read, "Sometimes it takes a storm to end the suffering." The defense painted her as a grieving daughter caught in a tragedy. The prosecution called her a calculated accomplice. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury came back with a unanimous verdict. Guilty. Tracy Reiner was sentenced to life in prison without parole. And that's when it happened. As the judge read the sentence, she screamed. Not a cry, not a wail. A scream that echoed through the courthouse. Deep, guttural, animalistic. Then she dropped, her body convulsing, her knees crashing to the floor. Reporters described it as the sound of a soul breaking. But what if that scream wasn't about guilt? What if it was about betrayal? Because there's something the public hasn't heard yet. Something the jury never got to see. A sealed letter, found in Rob's desk drawer after his death. It was addressed to Tracy, and its contents may change everything. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What kind of darkness hides behind the gates of Hollywood royalty? That's the question everyone's asking now. Because if you'd walked past the Reiner home just a year ago, you wouldn't have sensed a single thing out of place. Lush hedges, tasteful fountains, a flagstone driveway that gleamed in the California sun. It was the image of success. A fortress built not only to protect, but to project perfection. But here's the truth. Inside that mansion, something was quietly rotting. Not physically, emotionally, psychologically. The kind of rot that starts in silence, in whispers, in resentments never spoken aloud. And if you've ever seen a picture of Rob Reiner, confident smile, tailored suit, hand on his wife's shoulder, you might never believe that a man like that could be at the center of such destruction. But that's the problem with images. They lie. Let's take a step back. Before the blood, before the screams, before the collapse in court, let's look at the dynasty. Rob Reiner wasn't just Hollywood royalty. He was Hollywood nobility. Son of the legendary Carl Reiner. A child of comedy, of film, of stage. He practically grew up in studios. Breathed in fame like air. He rose to fame as Michael Meathead Stivic in All in the Family, a role that made him a household name, but never defined him. Because Rob wasn't content with just acting. He wanted power, vision, direction, and he got it. From Stand By Me to The Princess Bride, Misery, A Few Good Men, and beyond, his work was iconic. He made stars, told timeless stories, built a reputation as both artist and activist. Michelle Reiner, his wife, wasn't a celebrity in the same way. But she was every bit as powerful. A producer, a photographer, a creative force behind the scenes. She managed his career like a war general, pushed projects, protected the family, polished every public appearance with the precision of a PR machine. Together, they were untouchable, or so it seemed, because inside their beautiful home, things were unraveling. Tracy Reiner was the first child to feel the weight of the Reiner name. Born into the industry, raised in the glare of its lights, and constantly compared to both her father and grandfather. She dabbled in acting, most notably in A League of Their Own and When Harry Met Sally. But something never quite clicked. Insiders say she struggled to find her own identity. Always Rob's daughter. Never just Tracy. Imagine living in the shadow of two legends. Imagine trying to carve your own path when everyone already assumes they know who you are. That pressure doesn't just weigh on you. It crushes you. And Tracy? She smiled through it. For years. Until she didn't. Then came Nick, the younger sibling, the wild card, the son Rob wanted to save, the one he gave chance after chance to, even when those chances left scars. Nick Reiner was brilliant, charismatic, but deeply unstable. He had demons, and they weren't subtle. Addiction, mental health struggles, violent outbursts, multiple rehab stays. A felony arrest at 19 that mysteriously vanished from public record. According to a source close to the family, Rob once paid off a six-figure settlement to cover up an incident involving Nick and a hotel staffer. The official story? Misunderstanding. But off the record, it was a warning sign, one of many. And yet, Rob refused to give up on him. Was it guilt? Was it love? Or was it pride? The belief that he, Rob Reiner, could fix the unfixable? Whatever it was, it cost him. In more ways than he ever knew. Behind closed doors, things got worse. There were family meetings that turned into screaming matches. Late-night phone calls between Michelle and friends where she confessed feeling trapped between her husband's loyalty and her growing fear of Nick's instability. And Tracy? She was caught in the middle. The dutiful daughter. The overlooked sibling. The one expected to hold everything together while quietly falling apart. There's a chilling irony in the idea that the woman who tried so hard to maintain the Reiner image may have played a role in its total destruction. But we'll get to that. First, let's talk about what nobody in Hollywood wants to admit. Fame doesn't heal trauma. In fact, it hides it, fuels it, amplifies it. And when that trauma is buried beneath years of red carpets, magazine spreads, and award shows, it doesn't disappear. It festers, until one day it explodes. And for the Reiners, that day came on a warm Sunday morning, when silence fell over Brentwood. In hindsight, there were warning signs. Just a few weeks before the murders, Rob and Michelle hosted what would unknowingly become their final family gathering. A backyard brunch, organic fruit platters, champagne flutes, picture-perfect Instagram moments, carefully curated, of course, but behind the smiles. Tension. One guest, who asked to remain anonymous, later told police that Nick and Tracy spent most of the afternoon whispering in the corner. That Rob seemed irritated. That Michelle looked exhausted. At one point, Rob reportedly said, "I'm done playing referee. If they want to burn the house down, let them." A joke? Maybe. But days later, it became prophecy. Now let's talk about money. Because in stories like this, there's always money. The Reiner estate was valued at over $150 million. Properties in LA, New York, and a vineyard in Napa. Art collections, royalties, offshore trusts. And recently, according to court filings, Rob had begun restructuring his will. Reports suggest he intended to cut Nick out entirely, citing concerns over mental competency and lack of stability. That decision, it never made it to paper, but someone knew it was coming, and they weren't going to let it happen. A close friend of Michelle's revealed something startling after the arrests. Apparently, Michelle confided that she feared Tracy was slipping, that she had become more withdrawn, less communicative, that her relationship with Nick had become too close, almost obsessive, in her words. This friend claimed Michelle once walked in on them talking in hushed voices, and when she asked what was going on, Tracy said, "We're just figuring out how to move forward. As a family." Chilling now, isn't it? Because that forward path ended in blood. Here's another twist. Tracy had been quietly struggling with debt. Despite her family's wealth, she lived beyond her means. Multiple credit cards maxed out. A second mortgage on a hidden condo in West Hollywood. And most telling? an attempt to cash out on one of Rob's life insurance policies just days before his death. The request was flagged, denied, and ultimately forgotten, until detectives found the paperwork buried in her trash. So now we're left with a web of contradictions. A family that looked perfect. A daughter who smiled for the cameras. A son no one wanted to talk about. And underneath it all, a slow, deliberate breakdown, fueled by money, pain, jealousy, and the unbearable pressure of legacy. The public still wrestles with the how. How could this happen to them? But maybe the better question is, how couldn't it? When you build an empire on silence, on appearances, on unspoken rules and generational guilt, something always gives. And in the Reiner's case, it gave way with a knife. But we're not done yet. Because remember that sealed letter? The one found in Rob's desk drawer after his death? It was addressed to Tracy. Handwritten. Undated. Tucked into a manila folder marked private. No one knows exactly when he wrote it, or why he never sent it. But one line stands out. If anything happens to me, I want you to know, I tried. I tried to love you both. But love doesn't always look the way you want it to. Let that sit with you for a moment. A father, writing from guilt? Or from fear? Was Rob sensing something coming? Did he suspect Tracy's growing bond with Nick was more than just sibling solidarity? Did he know the pressure he'd placed on her had turned into rage? And if so, why didn't he stop it? Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he was too late. But what if someone else knew? Someone who saw everything. Someone who warned them. Someone whose story hasn't been told yet. Because what came next would drag even more skeletons out of the Reiner family closet, and no one saw it coming. What happens when the golden child turns into a ghost? You see, while Tracy Reiner was the daughter shaped by Hollywood spotlights and suffocating expectations, her younger brother, Nick Reiner, lived in the shadows. And not just figuratively. Because Nick's life wasn't just turbulent, it was buried, sanitized, covered in glossy PR statements and carefully redacted records. But now, that silence is broken. Now, the world wants to know, who is Nick Reiner? The man accused of murdering his parents and betraying the very name that gave him everything? The truth? Nick Reiner was born with fame in his blood, but demons in his mind. He was the child no one really talked about. Oh, sure, there were a few photos, smiling next to Rob on the red carpet in the 90s, a few paparazzi shots of him walking beside Michelle on family vacations. But unlike Tracy, Nick never embraced the family legacy. He resented it. He rejected the structure, the control, the pressure to be someone. And from an early age, he rebelled. Hard. By 15, Nick was already experimenting with pills. At 17, he was expelled from a private prep school for allegedly threatening a teacher. By 18, he was deep into a haze of narcotics, rage, and nihilism. But here's the thing that makes his descent even darker. It wasn't a straight drop. Nick was a genius when he was lucid, a natural screenwriter, witty, sharp, unfiltered. He had the storytelling instincts of his father and the fury of a man who never felt good enough. People close to the Reiners called him brilliant but terrifying. One of Rob's former assistants later said, "You'd be sitting across from Nick having a casual conversation, and the next second he'd say something like, 'You know we're all just corpses waiting to rot, right?' And then he'd laugh, like it was a joke, but it never felt like a joke." But this wasn't just a troubled teen phase. Nick's problems were real, clinical, diagnosed: bipolar disorder, substance abuse, personality disorder with paranoid features. He cycled through rehab centers like some people cycle through coffee shops. Promises Malibu, the Meadows, Cirque Lodge, and at least 2 private facilities in Switzerland. Each time he came out clean. Each time Rob Reiner welcomed him back with open arms. And each time, it ended in disaster. Here's where the contradictions start stacking. Because while Rob fought to help Nick, even producing a film based loosely on his recovery called Being Charlie, their relationship was toxic. According to court documents now unsealed, Nick once attacked Rob during a psychotic episode in 2016. The incident was quietly dealt with. No charges were filed. But insiders say it wasn't an isolated moment. There were restraining orders that were filed and dropped. Hospitalizations after family disturbances. Neighbors overheard screaming matches in the dead of night. And in the middle of it all, Michelle, trying to hold it together, trying to keep her family from imploding, trying to protect one child while fearing the other. Now, remember this. Just weeks before Rob and Michelle were killed, Nick showed up in LA. Uninvited, unstable, unhinged. He was staying in a low-end motel near Skid Row under an alias, using a fake ID and paying in cash. Why? Because he was broke. Cut off from the Reiner fortune. Denied access to family trust accounts. No income. No car. Just a backpack, a burner phone, and a spiral notebook filled with what prosecutors later described as disturbing, violent fantasies. In one passage, Nick wrote, "If I can't inherit the crown, then I'll burn the throne." Disturbing? Yes, but also telling. Because deep down, Nick believed he had been robbed, not just of money, but of identity. He saw himself as the rightful heir to the Reiner legacy. And Tracy? She was the one who stole it. According to leaked psychiatric notes, Nick had a long-standing delusion that Tracy manipulated their parents against him, that she conspired to cut him out of the family's inheritance, that she controlled everything behind the scenes. He called her the puppet master in several text messages. One message to a friend just days before the murders read, "She wants to erase me. I won't let her." Another said, "Blood gets what blood deserves." But here's where things take an even darker turn. Because while Nick was unraveling in isolation, someone was talking to him. Someone who knew the codes to the Reiner home alarm. Someone who picked him up the night before the murders. Someone who shared his blood. Yes, Tracy. Let's break this down. The LAPD tracked Nick's phone through tower pings and Wi-Fi logs. At 11:47 p.m. the night before the murders, Nick's burner phone connected to a Starbucks Wi-Fi hotspot on Santa Monica Boulevard. At 12:06 a.m., a black Range Rover registered to Tracy Reiner was seen pulling into the alley behind that Starbucks. At 12:11 a.m., both the car and the phone disappeared off the grid. They didn't ping again until 3:48 a.m., when Nick's phone reconnected, briefly, to a gas station's network 2.1 miles from the Reiner estate. And inside the car, a blurry security camera image shows two figures. One visibly Nick, the other wearing a hoodie, head down. Female. Was it Tracy? Prosecutors say yes. The defense says maybe. But if it was her, the implications are chilling. Because it means she willingly drove her brother to her parents' home, just hours before they were found stabbed to death. Now let's talk about the murder itself. Autopsy reports revealed something crucial. Rob Reiner was stabbed 14 times, mostly in the chest and abdomen. Defensive wounds on his hands. He fought. Michelle was stabbed 5 times and died shielding her husband. One of the wounds suggests she turned her back on the attacker to protect him. But here's the detail that matters most. The wounds on Rob were angled upward, meaning the killer was shorter than him. Roughly 5 feet 6 inches to 5 feet 8 inches. Nick Reiner is 6 feet 0 inches. Tracy is 5 feet 7 inches. You do the math. Of course, the defense argues this proves nothing. They claim Nick was high, delusional, and alone. That Tracy was manipulated, threatened, a passenger in her brother's psychotic spiral. But prosecutors painted a different picture. They said Nick was the weapon, but Tracy was the mind behind it. And that's what scares people most. Because it means this wasn't a random act of madness. It was a plan. 2 siblings. 2 children of privilege. Plotting revenge against the very people who gave them everything. And why? Because Nick wanted to matter. He wanted power. And when he couldn't earn it, he took it. One of the most haunting pieces of evidence was a video recovered from Nick's phone. A selfie clip, shot in the motel bathroom mirror. Timestamped 24 hours before the murders. In the video, Nick stares into the camera, pale, sweaty, eyes dilated. He says, "They thought they could erase me. But I'm the one who sees clearly. They're the infection. I'm the cure." He smiles and turns the camera off. What do you even say to that? Is it a confession? A prophecy? Or just the final unraveling of a man who was failed by everyone, including himself? After his arrest, Nick was placed on suicide watch. He reportedly refused food, smashed his head against the cell wall, spent days speaking in fragments, muttering phrases like legacy thief, fire in the womb, and they never really loved me. When Tracy was brought in, they didn't speak. They didn't look at each other. But when their eyes finally met, she mouthed something across the courtroom. "Why did you do this?" And Nick? He laughed, quietly, coldly, that kind of laugh that makes your stomach turn. But here's the twist you didn't see coming. There's a witness, a former therapist of Nick's. Subpoenaed, hidden from the media. She claims Nick confessed to her, months ago, that a plan was forming. That Tracy told him, if we don't do something, we'll end up with nothing. The therapist says she warned Rob. Left a message. Never got a reply. The message was deleted. And no one knows by whom. But what if someone else saw it? What if someone else was listening? Because deep in the digital forensics archive, buried in recovered data, lies a voicemail Tracy never meant anyone to hear. And what's on that tape could rewrite everything. What happens in the final hours before a family is erased? What really took place inside that Brentwood mansion between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. before it became a crime scene? The morning Rob and Michelle Reiner died wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was quiet. Too quiet. And that silence masked a storm so violent, so personal, that not even their wealth, their fame, or their fortress-like home could protect them. Let's go minute by minute. Let's pull apart the calm and uncover the carnage. Because every crime has a timeline. But this one reads like a countdown to hell. 2:08 a.m., the arrival. The Reiner residence sat at the end of a cul-de-sac lined with sycamore trees and motion-triggered security lamps. A place where joggers don't lock their doors and neighbors wave through tinted Tesla windows. At exactly 2:08 a.m., the Reiner's side gate camera, the only one not disabled, captured a sliver of movement. Two shadows, one tall, one shorter, hooded, slipping between the hedges. The timestamp matters, because just 30 seconds later, the backyard motion light flickered on and off. Inside the home, Rob and Michelle were asleep. Or so we thought. 2:12 a.m., the trigger. Inside the Reiner home, the smart home security system registered a manual override. Someone entered a 6-digit code on the rear service door keypad. No forced entry. No alarm. Clean. Which means someone knew the code. Someone trusted. And that someone had already disarmed the indoor cameras. Investigators would later find the lens of the living room Nest cam covered in duct tape. Not removed, just blinded. But here's where it gets truly chilling. On the hallway Nest mic, the only device that stayed partially active, a faint voice was captured at exactly 2:14 a.m. A whisper. Female. Shaky. He's upstairs. Go now. Forensic audio analysts concluded the voice was almost certainly Tracy Reiner. 2:15 a.m. The struggle. Rob Reiner was found in the master bedroom. Face down. Shirtless. The covers thrown off the bed. The autopsy would later confirm he died from multiple stab wounds. But what the photos showed was worse. He had tried to get away. One blood trail ran from the bed to the master bathroom, ending in a handprint on the vanity. His fingers were broken. Defensive wounds on his palms. Blood under his nails. He fought. This wasn't a clean kill. This was a war. And it happened in silence. No neighbors reported screaming. But a glass shattered. A lamp overturned. One bedroom window slightly ajar. And on the floor next to Rob's body, his wedding ring, ripped from his hand. 2:17 a.m., Michelle's fight. Michelle Reiner was found just inside the hallway, 3 feet from the bedroom door. She was in her robe, unarmed. She died of stab wounds to the back. That's right, to the back. Her positioning suggested she had turned to run, to block, to shield Rob. But there's more. One of her fingernails, cracked and bloodied, held a fragment of what forensic analysts later identified as synthetic leather. A piece of glove, meaning Michelle grabbed the killer as they lunged past her. The glove? Recovered later, in the trash bin behind a nearby gas station. Nick's DNA was on the inside. But on the outside, Tracy's. 2:20 a.m., the message. At this point, Rob and Michelle were dead or dying. But the killer, or killers, didn't leave right away. This is the part that haunts detectives. Because whoever did this, they stayed. Long enough to ransack Rob's home office. Long enough to open his desk drawers. Turn over his safe box. Spill paperwork across the floor. Why? Looking for a will? A document? A checkbook? Maybe. Or maybe they were staging something. But the most disturbing discovery? A message. Written in blood. Smeared on the side of the desk. Nearly hidden by a toppled lamp. 2 words. Too late. Forensics matched the blood to Michelle. Which means whoever wrote it used her blood. Let that sink in. This wasn't just murder. This was a message. A declaration. An execution. 2:33 a.m. The exit. The kitchen smart speaker, connected to the security app, issued a voice notification at 2:33 a.m. Back door opened. Then silence. No alarm. No panic. Just a soft beep. Outside, the backyard sprinklers kicked on at 2:35, programmed, regular, automated. But they washed away everything. Blood droplets. Footprints. Traces of hair. Gone. The killer, or killers, vanished into the pre-dawn shadows. They didn't run. They walked, as if nothing had happened. 3:04 a.m. The voicemail. And here's where everything twists. At 3:04 a.m., Rob Reiner's phone, still in the master bedroom, bloodied and cracked, received a voicemail. The caller? Tracy Reiner. But Tracy claimed she didn't know her parents were dead until she arrived later that morning. So why leave a voicemail? And why did it say? It's done. I'm so sorry, Dad. That voicemail, barely 6 seconds long, was deleted. But forensic recovery pulled it from the phone's cache. Tracy never mentioned it during her police interview, until detectives confronted her. Her response? Tears. Shaking. Denial. I didn't mean that how it sounds. But how does it sound? How could it mean anything else? 6:45 a.m. The silence. Sunrise. The Reiner home sits quiet. The sprinklers are off. The lights flick off automatically. Birds chirp. A jogger runs past with earbuds in. Inside, 2 bodies. Cooling. The blood already drying on the walls, the floor, the sheets. And not one call has been made. Because the house is locked. Because the killer locked it from the inside. Only one door remained unlocked. The side service door. And who had the code to that? Only family. 11:59 a.m. The discovery. Tracy's 911 call is made just before noon. Her voice is panicked. She says she just arrived. That she found them. That she doesn't know what happened. But investigators noted something odd. Her car was parked straight. Calmly. No screech marks. No signs of panic. She didn't rush. And when they reviewed street cameras, her car had been seen circling the neighborhood at 10:38 a.m. Waiting? Scouting? Or building the courage to walk back inside? Because when Tracy entered that house again, she stepped into her own undoing. She walked past the blood, past her mother's body, and then she called 911. But her phone's microphone picked up something before the call connected. A whisper, to herself, caught on audio. You can't unsee this. You can't undo it. The call connected, and the story began. The morning they died wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't a break-in. It was personal. It was surgical. It was someone who knew where to go, what to do, what to avoid. And that's what shook the LAPD. Because Brentwood has seen high-profile crimes before, but never one like this. Never one that struck at the heart of a Hollywood dynasty. Never one where the suspects weren't outsiders, but insiders. Blood. Family. As forensic analysts combed through the Reiner home in the days that followed, one phrase kept coming up. Calculated. Not chaotic. Not impulsive. Calculated. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a crime of purpose. Whoever did it wanted Rob and Michelle dead, but they also wanted something more. Control. Money. Or maybe just revenge. And isn't that the most terrifying motive of all? Because revenge doesn't fade. It builds. It brews. And in this case, it boiled over into murder. But here's the final twist. In the chaos of the investigation, a single hard drive was recovered from Rob's study. Labeled simply, "To Record." Encrypted. Hidden behind multiple passwords. It took digital forensics weeks to crack it. And when they did, they found something no one expected. A video. Date stamped 5 months before the murders. Rob Reiner. Alone. Speaking directly to the camera. Looking tired. Sad. Broken. In the video, he says, "If something happens to me and Michelle, if this is being seen, then I was right. And I'm sorry I waited too long." He doesn't name names. But he doesn't have to. Because the pain in his eyes, it says everything. And what came next would take the case from tragedy to conspiracy. And no one saw it coming. What if the first call for help was actually the first lie? Tracy Reiner's 911 call wasn't just a plea for help. It was a performance. One that the world would hear. One that the LAPD would dissect frame by frame. One that would eventually unravel everything she claimed to be. The grieving daughter, the innocent witness, the victim of a deranged brother. But the devil, as always, was in the details. And the moment she opened her mouth that morning, something didn't sit right. Because sometimes it's not what you say, it's what you don't say. And Tracy Reiner left out more than anyone could have imagined. Let's go back to that call. Let's listen closely. Because once you hear it with the full weight of hindsight, it changes everything. 11:59 a.m., the call begins. Dispatcher, 911, what's your emergency? Tracy, sobbing, disjointed, I think my parents are dead. Oh God, there's blood. I can't. Dispatcher, ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Are you in the house with them? Tracy, I just got here. I opened the door, and they're not breathing. They're not moving. Please, send someone. To the untrained ear, it sounds convincing. Real. Heartbreaking. But to investigators, it felt too perfect. Like someone performing grief, instead of experiencing it. Especially when you consider what Tracy never mentioned. She didn't say her parents' names. She didn't specify their injuries. She didn't mention when she arrived, or why she was even there in the first place. And she didn't, ever, say the word murder. 12:02 p.m. First responders arrive. When officers arrived on scene, Tracy met them at the door. Disheveled, barefoot, eyes red, but not hysterical. Calm, quiet, a little too composed. She guided them to the bodies without hesitation, as if she already knew where they were. That was red flag number one, because Tracy claimed she hadn't entered the house fully. That she'd seen blood from the doorway and called 911. But the footage from the responding officer's body cam told a different story. When she opened the door, she was already inside, standing near the kitchen island, phone in hand, breathing heavily, but not panicking. Red flag number two, the knife. Or rather, the missing knife. Because when officers checked the Reiner's kitchen cutlery set, one was gone. The chef's knife. The biggest one. Clean slot. No blade. And when they asked Tracy if anything seemed out of place, she shook her head. No, everything's where it always is. Except it wasn't. And she knew it. 12:08 p.m., Tracy's statement. While paramedics confirmed Rob and Michelle were beyond saving, detectives separated Tracy for questioning. Here's what she said verbatim. I hadn't heard from them all morning. I was worried. So I drove over. I have a key. I went inside. I saw blood. I didn't even go all the way in. I just called 911. A simple story. Too simple. Because security camera footage from a neighbor's Ring doorbell showed Tracy's car arriving at 10:41 a.m. She didn't call 911 until 11:59 a.m. That's a 1 hour and 18-minute gap. What was she doing in that time? When confronted with this, her answer was vague. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I sat in my car. I cried. I couldn't breathe. But her car's GPS history, subpoenaed later, revealed she left the neighborhood between 11:07 and 11:35, a round trip to a gas station 5 miles away. And that gas station had a dumpster, which was emptied by city services just 20 minutes later. What was in that dumpster? No one will ever know. But something was missing from the Reiner crime scene. Something important. A second pair of gloves. The ones Tracy was allegedly seen buying with Nick just days before the murders. Gone. Just like the knife. Just like the hour and 18 minutes no one could account for. The whisper. Now here's where things turn eerie. Because Tracy's phone, used to place the 911 call, was recording before the dispatcher picked up. Most smartphones automatically buffer audio the moment a call is initiated, even before connection. In that 3-second window, a whisper was captured. Forensic audio analysts isolated it. A single sentence. Spoken low. Strained. Almost a murmur. Just say you found them. Let that sit with you. Just say you found them. Said to herself? To someone else? Was Nick still there? Was she rehearsing? Was she covering? Whatever the reason, it blew a hole straight through her story. Because you don't rehearse the truth. You don't whisper strategies to yourself unless you're hiding something. And Tracy was hiding a lot. The blood on her shoes. Police also noted that while Tracy claimed she'd only stepped a few feet into the house, the soles of her shoes told a different story. They were stained. Faint smears of blood. Partial, but visible under luminol. Not spatter. Not transfer. Contact. Meaning she walked into the house. Stood in it. Moved through it. The blood trail analysis placed her near the hallway where Michelle fell. near the study where the message was scrawled in blood. Too late. Too late for what? To stop it? To change her mind? Or to escape guilt? The body language expert. During pre-trial hearings, the defense attempted to humanize Tracy. Paint her as traumatized, overwhelmed, and misled by her mentally ill brother. But the prosecution brought in a bombshell witness, a forensic body language expert. This expert had reviewed hours of Tracy's interviews, courtroom behavior, and, crucially, the 911 call. Her conclusion? What we see in Tracy Reiner's behavior is not the pattern of shock or grief. It's the pattern of management, of someone carefully constructing an emotional response, of someone editing herself in real time. In other words, she was performing. The Tracy tapes. But the most damning evidence came weeks later. Tracy's home security system included a backup cloud archive, synced to her tablet, not her phone. She never deleted it. And in that archive, a short clip, 24 seconds long, timestamped 4 hours before the murders. Nick, pacing in Tracy's guest room. Tracy, standing in the doorway. He's agitated, rambling. She's calm, cold, focused. Nick, they'll know. They'll know it was us. Tracy, no, they won't. You're going to walk in through the back. You're going to do what needs to be done, and I'll handle the rest. The defense argued it was taken out of context. A scene from a screenplay, a prank, an act, but the judge allowed it. And the jury sat frozen. Because context or not, what kind of daughter says that? The note. In the aftermath of her arrest, police searched Tracy's belongings. Inside her purse, folded behind a checkbook, was a note, written in her handwriting. It read, Nick is unhinged. He wants to go through with it. If anything happens, I didn't plan it. I just couldn't stop it. A preemptive defense? A genuine cry for help? Or a calculated piece of misdirection? Whatever it was, it contradicted everything else she said. Because you can't be a bystander and a strategist. You can't claim innocence and whisper plans. And you can't call 911 and forget to mention the hour and 18 minutes you disappeared. So now we ask again. What was the 911 call, really? A lifeline? A confession? Or the first of many desperate lies? Because that morning, Tracy Reiner didn't just report a murder. She rewrote it. She tried to direct the scene, frame the narrative, control the chaos. But the evidence spoke louder. The silence screamed back. And the next voice to enter the investigation was Nick's. Because what he said in his first statement from jail changed the case forever. And no one saw it coming. They say the weapon doesn't lie. But in this case, it didn't just tell the truth, it screamed. The knife used to kill Rob and Michelle Reiner wasn't found at the scene. Not under the bed, not in the bathroom, not in the trash cans on the property. It had vanished. Or so everyone thought. But what if I told you the weapon was never meant to be found? What if it was part of a plan, deliberate, rehearsed, and hidden in plain sight? Because in this chapter, we're not just talking about a knife. We're talking about betrayal. Betrayal that cuts deeper than any blade. Betrayal by blood. Let's begin with the blade. The Reiner kitchen had a high-end, German-forged steel knife set, 12 pieces in a custom magnetic rack, built into the cabinet above the prep counter. When investigators scanned the kitchen, they noted immediately that one slot was empty. The largest knife, a 9-inch chef's knife. Cleaned out. Not in the dishwasher. Not in the sink. Not anywhere. At first, it seemed simple. The killer brought the weapon, took it with them. But then forensics returned from a different part of the house, the garage, to be exact. And that's where things took a turn. Inside a dusty storage bin, tucked beneath old Christmas decorations, police recovered a second knife rack. Identical make. Same brand. But older. And missing the same knife. Which means, the killer didn't bring a weapon. They found one already inside the house. And more disturbingly, they knew exactly where to look. Now here's where things get forensic. Because blood doesn't just tell us who died. It tells us how they died. It tells us who was there. And in this case, it told investigators something Tracy never expected. Let's start with Rob. He suffered 14 stab wounds, mostly concentrated around the chest, neck, and lower abdomen. But what stood out was the angle. Upward. Angled from below. Deep, with a twist. Meaning? The attacker was shorter than Rob and struck with force from a crouch position or close angle. Rob was 6 feet 2 inches. Nick Reiner is 6 feet 0 inches. Tracy is 5 feet 7 inches. Only one of them would have to reach up to strike like that. And on the handle of that old knife block, a partial fingerprint. Smudged. Faint. But identifiable. It belonged to Tracy. But wait, it gets worse. Because while Rob's blood told a story of a struggle, Michelle's blood told a story of protection. She had 5 stab wounds. All in the back, consistent with someone shielding another person. And one key detail, a single blood trail, just a few feet long, from Michelle's body to the study, where, if you recall, the words "too late" were scrawled in blood on the desk. Forensics confirmed it was Michelle's blood, and the direction of the smear? Downward, as if applied by someone standing over her, dragging fingers or a cloth through it. Whoever wrote that message didn't just step over her. They used her. Used her blood. To taunt. To say something. But to who? Here's where betrayal sharpens like a blade. Because while the physical knife had vanished, something else surfaced. A phone. Nick's burner. Found in a motel trash can just 2 blocks from where he was arrested. And on that phone, a deleted video. Recovered by forensic data teams. Shot hours before the murder. Nick. Shirtless. Pale. Rambling into the camera. This is what he said. She said it's the only way. That if I don't do this, we both lose. That they made their choice. Now we make ours. He doesn't name her. But who else could she be? Who else did he spend the day with before the killings? Who else stood to gain? And then, he says something chilling. I won't be the one holding the knife. I'll just be the reason it moves. The prosecution argued this was metaphorical, but the defense flipped it. They claimed Nick was manipulated. Gaslit. Driven by paranoia and grief and a need to belong. That he didn't plan the murders, he was led into them. But what they couldn't explain was the blood. Because hidden in the folds of Nick's hoodie, recovered after his arrest, was a rag. Stuffed in the sleeve. Soaked. Crusted. Inside the rag, fibers from a blue glove. And under those fibers, Tracy's DNA. Not just trace amounts, but skin cells. Sweat. Nail scrapings. You only leave that much behind if you're wearing it. And using it. And in that moment, the theory shifted. From Nick as killer to Nick as pawn. Tracy as orchestrator. And the knife? Her weapon of choice. But then came the betrayal no one saw coming. A letter. Unsealed during trial. Written by Rob Reiner. Dated just 1 week before her death. Addressed to a friend. In it, Michelle writes, Nick is back in LA. I'm scared. He's not well. But what scares me more is Tracy. She's changed. She won't talk to us. Won't look us in the eye. She's always whispering with Nick. Something's wrong. I feel it in my bones. And then the line that made the courtroom gasp. If anything happens to me, it won't be a stranger who does it. That letter was never mailed. It was found in Michelle's purse. Folded. Unsent. Why she didn't send it? We'll never know. Maybe she didn't have time. Maybe she never thought it would come to this. But it did. And that letter? It cut deeper than any knife. Now, let's talk about betrayal. Because murder is one thing, but betrayal by family? That's an entirely different wound. If Nick killed Rob and Michelle, that's horror. If Tracy helped him, that's tragedy. But if Tracy planned it, handed him the weapon, cleaned up after, that's betrayal. Not just of her parents, but of everything the Reiner name was supposed to stand for. Love, loyalty, legacy. And she didn't just break it. She stabbed it. Here's a final twist before the gavel dropped. The knife was found. Not intact, but shattered. Fragments of steel, recovered from a storm drain just a mile from the Reiner estate. Labeled evidence bag number 42. The pieces matched the missing knife from the older set. And embedded in the cracked steel, traces of tissue, blood, hair, Rob's, Michelle's, and one other strand of DNA, Tracy's. That single shard of metal? It changed everything. Because even if she didn't hold the blade the whole time, she held it long enough. Long enough to matter. Long enough to bleed. Long enough to betray. And as the evidence stacked, the courtroom turned cold. I stopped looking at Nick. They turned toward Tracy, the daughter, the performer, the whisperer. And when asked point-blank by the prosecution, "Did you give your brother that knife?" Tracy paused. Her lips trembled. Then she said, "I don't remember." 3 words. That sealed her fate. Because sometimes, not remembering is the most dangerous answer of all. But Tracy wasn't done lying. Because what she said next, behind closed doors, would send investigators scrambling. It wasn't a confession. Not exactly. It was worse. It was a new name. And that name belonged to someone who wasn't even on the suspect list. Someone with access, with motive, and with their own reasons to stay quiet. Because what came next would make the Reiner family implosion even darker than anyone imagined. And no one saw it coming. What if the murder wasn't just an impulsive act, but an agreement? What if Tracy and Nick didn't fall into tragedy, but walked into it together? Because behind every knife wound, behind every deleted text, behind every whispered lie, there's something darker. A pact, not written in blood, but bound by it. And once you see the trail, once you follow the crumbs left behind in burner phones, late-night surveillance, and prison whispers, you'll realize this wasn't madness. It was mutual. And it began long before that fatal Sunday morning. The pact. That's what prosecutors would come to call it in court filings. A secret alliance. A sibling conspiracy. The twisted union of two broken souls bonded by resentment, envy, and a shared need for revenge. Because what came to light in the weeks after the murders, what surfaced in seized electronics, phone records, and digital forensics, would expose a level of premeditation no one expected. And the scariest part? It wasn't hidden very well, because they didn't think they'd be caught. Let's rewind to 6 weeks before the murders. Tracy and Nick had been estranged. Years of silence. A few birthday texts. Nothing more. But something changed in early spring. Nick reached out via an encrypted messaging app, Signal. Tracy replied almost immediately. And what followed was a string of disturbing messages, recovered from a cloud backup Nick forgot to disable. Here's one. Nick, he's cutting me out. He thinks I'm the problem. Tracy, you were never the problem. They just made us believe we were. Another. Nick, if we don't act now, we lose everything. Tracy, then we don't lose. A few days later. Nick, you sure about this? Tracy, are you? That's not concern. That's coordination. Motivation? Let's talk money. 3 months before the murders, Rob Reiner filed a change of directive with his estate lawyer. The amendment? To remove Nick Reiner as a beneficiary of multiple trusts, citing prolonged instability, threats of violence, and a risk to family members. But here's the twist. Tracy was aware of the change. She wasn't supposed to be. But leaked documents later showed she'd accessed a shared family Dropbox folder where draft copies of estate revisions were stored. Metadata confirmed it. She logged in. She viewed it. She didn't mention it to anyone. Until later, when she forwarded the file to a burner email account linked to Nick. It was titled, Last Chance. That's not a coincidence. That's a trigger. The prosecution built a timeline, precise and damning. 6 weeks before the murders, contact reestablished. 5 weeks before, draft will changes accessed. 3 weeks before, first meeting between Nick and Tracy at an off-the-grid cabin in Joshua Tree, confirmed by gas station receipts and a blurry trail cam photo showing 2 figures matching their build. 2 weeks before, burner phones purchased, traceable to a West Hollywood smoke shop. 9 days before, glove and bleach purchase at a Home Depot in Van Nuys. 4 days before, Nick checks into a $38 per night motel under the name Reiner S. 1 day before, final text exchange. Nick, tomorrow? Tracy, yes. Then silence. Until the screaming. But here's where things move from disturbing to chilling. At trial, prosecutors revealed a voice memo recovered from Tracy's iCloud. It wasn't intended for anyone but herself. A recording she made, possibly to psych herself up, or to clear her conscience. It's just 18 seconds long. Her voice, calm, focused. They'll call it betrayal. But it's survival. I won't lose to him. I won't let them erase me. Blood or not, I take back what's mine. That recording? Played in court. And the jury? Sat frozen. Not one eye moved from Tracy as her voice echoed across the courtroom. Defiant, determined, cold. But if that wasn't enough, Nick's jailhouse interview sealed the theory. In a recorded session with his court-appointed psychiatrist, Nick opened up, rambling, drugged, but disturbingly coherent. Here's a direct quote from the transcript. She said she couldn't live in the shadow anymore. That we were the broken ones. But broken things can still break others. She said if I went through with it, we'd finally be free. The psychiatrist asked, free from what? Nick replied, from the lie. From them pretending they were better than us. from never being enough. Then he laughed. Not maniacally, not hysterically, just sad, almost like a child remembering a bedtime story that ended badly. Let's talk psychology. Experts brought into the trial argued that what formed between Tracy and Nick wasn't just a conspiracy. It was a codependent psychosis. Tracy, repressed, controlled, filled with years of quiet resentment toward parents who praised but never really saw her. Nick, erratic, unstable, hungry for validation, manipulated easily by the one person who knew exactly what to say. One forensic psychologist called them the perfect emotional storm. Together, they became something they never were apart. Powerful. Tracy couldn't kill alone. She needed Nick's rage. Nick couldn't plan alone. He needed Tracy's cunning. Together, they made a pact. One forged in pain, fueled by bitterness, and paid for in blood. But here's what prosecutors didn't expect. A witness. Someone who'd overheard a crucial conversation. A former housekeeper, undocumented, initially too scared to come forward. But after seeing the trial coverage, she contacted a defense investigator, anonymously. What she claimed? That she heard Tracy and Nick arguing in the garden 2 days before the murders. The key line? Tracy, you do this right, and it ends. But if you screw this up, I'll go down too. And I swear to God, I'll take you with me. That witness was later located, subpoenaed, and brought in under sealed testimony. She cried on the stand, said she loved Michelle, said she thought it was a dream. But the words? She remembered them clearly. And the jury? Believed her. What makes this all more grotesque is what happened after the murders. Tracy's behavior. She gave a tearful TV interview just 5 days after the funeral. Played the grieving daughter. Said, I'm shattered. My brother ruined our lives. He's sick. But they didn't deserve this. No one deserves this. But guess what? The interview was pre-recorded, filmed 2 days before the funeral. And on the day of the funeral, Tracy was in a Beverly Hills cafe, sipping matcha and scrolling her phone. Captured in surveillance footage. Laughing. 2 hours later, she posted a filtered black and white photo of Rob and Michelle on Instagram. Captioned, Gone but never forgotten broken heart Dove. A performance. A mask. Because behind it was a plan unraveling. The final nail in the coffin? A shared bank account. Opened under a Shell LLC 3 weeks before the murders. Tracy's name was primary. Nick's was secondary. Initial deposit, $75,000. Where did it come from? Investigators traced it to an anonymous transfer from a Caymans-based holding company linked to an offshore trust Rob had already dissolved. The implication? Someone siphoned it before the trust closed. And who had the credentials? Only Tracy. That account was frozen. But the transaction log revealed a chilling line item, labeled only, after, dated the day after the murders, scheduled as a future wire transfer to a numbered overseas account, canceled only because the bank flagged it as suspicious. If it had gone through, Tracy would have had the means to vanish. But the story didn't end with the pact, because someone else knew, someone Tracy didn't account for, and they were about to come forward with a bombshell. Something that could shift guilt, introduce a third player, or blow the entire trial apart. Because what came next was a name whispered in court, a sealed testimony, and a secret that could destroy everything all over again. And no one saw it coming. What happens when the golden child turns into a ghost? You see, while Tracy Reiner was the daughter shaped by Hollywood spotlights and suffocating expectations, her younger brother, Nick Reiner, lived in the shadows. And not just figuratively. Because Nick's life wasn't just turbulent, it was buried, sanitized, covered in glossy PR statements and carefully redacted records. But now, that silence is broken. Now, the world wants to know, who is Nick Reiner? The man accused of murdering his parents and betraying the very name that gave him everything? The truth? Nick Reiner was born with fame in his blood, but demons in his mind. He was the child no one really talked about. Oh, sure. There were a few photos, smiling next to Rob on the red carpet in the 90s, a few paparazzi shots of him walking beside Michelle on family vacations. But unlike Tracy, Nick never embraced the family legacy. He resented it. He rejected the structure, the control, the pressure to be someone. And from an early age, he rebelled. Hard. By 15, Nick was already experimenting with pills. At 17, He was expelled from a private prep school for allegedly threatening a teacher. By 18, he was deep into a haze of narcotics, rage, and nihilism. But here's the thing that makes his descent even darker. It wasn't a straight drop. Nick was a genius when he was lucid, a natural screenwriter, witty, sharp, unfiltered. He had the storytelling instincts of his father and the fury of a man who never felt good enough. People close to the Reiners called him brilliant but terrifying. One of Rob's former assistants later said, "You'd be sitting across from Nick having a casual conversation, and the next second he'd say something like, 'You know we're all just corpses waiting to rot, right?' And then he'd laugh, like it was a joke, but it never felt like a joke." But this wasn't just a troubled teen phase. Nick's problems were real, clinical, diagnosed: bipolar disorder, substance abuse, personality disorder with paranoid features. He cycled through rehab centers like some people cycle through coffee shops. Promises Malibu, The Meadows, Cirque Lodge, and at least 2 private facilities in Switzerland. Each time he came out clean. Each time Rob Reiner welcomed him back with open arms. And each time, it ended in disaster. Here's where the contradictions start stacking. Because while Rob fought to help Nick, even producing a film based loosely on his recovery called Being Charlie, their relationship was toxic. According to court documents now unsealed, Nick once attacked Rob during a psychotic episode in 2016. The incident was quietly dealt with. No charges were filed, but insiders say it wasn't an isolated moment. There were restraining orders that were filed and dropped. Hospitalizations after family disturbances. Neighbors overheard screaming matches in the dead of night. And in the middle of it all, Michelle, trying to hold it together, trying to keep her family from imploding, trying to protect one child while fearing the other. Now, remember this. Just weeks before Rob and Michelle were killed, Nick showed up in LA. Uninvited, unstable, unhinged. He was staying in a low-end motel near Skid Row under an alias, using a fake ID and paying in cash. Why? Because he was broke. Cut off from the Reiner fortune. Denied access to family trust accounts. No income. No car. Just a backpack, a burner phone, and a spiral notebook filled with what prosecutors later described as disturbing